Hey, Soul Tribe. I'm Kamala Devi, and today I'm having a juicy conversation with Ella Move. And we are talking about erotic innocence. So, what we thought, because it's something that's so near and dear to our hearts, and we're having a nice dialogue about it. And we're like, oh, let's just include people. We're going to let you in to eavesdrop on our exploration of erotic innocence. But before we get into kind of defining, some things like what is that and why would we want to get into it? I would love, Ella, if you just introduce yourself a little bit in the context of this topic of erotic innocence. Like, who are you to be even, musing on it?
Thank you, KD. Um, I who am I? I think I got stuck at who am I to talk about this. Um, hmm.
Kind of threw a deep Zen koan at you at the beginning of the call.
Yes.
But just a little introduction for, I think a lot of my audience knows me, that I'm kinky, poly, queer, talking about all things, sacred sexuality, all things erotic. But just a little background on you.
So I've been working in the field of sacred sexuality and embodiment, um, connecting to the heart and to God for the past around 9 years, and still a student and learning a lot what it means for me. And what I've been discovering on my journey, um, working with sacred sexuality, is how to return to love within myself. And when I work, I do one-on-one in-person work with my clients, mostly how they get in touch with their hearts
Mm.
when the passage to whatever was blocking their lower chakras and sex centers through shame, through the conditioning that they received from their families and media and environment, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on, as we all know. And how the pleasure transpires in so many ways in the body, and that real tantric connection to all the senses that we as humans have on this earth, and how much more enjoyable all aspects of the life become.
Beautiful. Yeah. So you're noticing like your clients are moving through those blocks and just getting touch with the natural like joy of life and pleasure. And I'm so happy to be talking about erotic innocence specifically with you, because in the years that we've known each other now and traveled together and been in sacred circles, you have one of those vital, joyful, like playful energies. I really admire and love how you show up. I think at one time we called you, the archetype of the bliss bunny. You really have a lot of that to bring and shower on people. So tell me a little bit, like, let's just lay the foundation for this conversation. What is erotic innocence to you?
This is such a great question. Thank you so much, Katie, for asking it. I'm still on the road of discovering what it is. And I think it's important to define those terms, because probably different people have different definitions of it, and how they can come together, these two words that can be coming from probably different, totally different spectrums, and can cause dissonance to some ears.
Right. It's almost like an oxymoron, right? Erotic sounds so mature and adult, and then innocence. Yeah.
um yeah, so For me, I'll start with the word innocence. Innocence, right? And I think it can have a lot of definitions, the word innocence, and who's talking about it in which context. And for me, when I think about innocence, I think about children. I love working with children. I worked as a kindergarten teacher for a few years, and I volunteer with special um, special ed special needs um, sorry children.
That
And
touches me. Like anyone who volunteers to work around special ed kids, it's like you're a saint. Like patience and compassion, and I really, really honor that work. Thank you.
and it really it it was showing me so much and teaching me so much about my own heart and how I show up in the world, um, and how that innocence with which children see things and express themselves from here and now, which is for me that connection from the lower centers to our heart, when everything is aligned and there's no mind
Mhm.
and no plotting, no overthinking. It's just there, what
Hmm.
is present. And the the curiosity, the part of that innocence is the curiosity where they want to explore and use the hands, use smell, use
All the
taste, use,
senses.
yes,
Absolutely.
everything. I just wanted also, right, to say what are the senses, right?
Yeah.
So that's the sensuality for me, is when using the senses to explore the world, not from the brain center. So this is the innocence. They don't know that they can burn themselves or they can hurt themselves, but having that experiential life tasting knowledge, and not what they're being told to do or not to do. So this is that innocence
Yeah.
part for me.
I want to kind of double click on this statement that they don't yet know they can be hurt. Because for me, innocence is this like trust, this like deep, like, all is well and it's going to turn out great and I'm still immortal. like uh, like I don't know what I don't know, and therefore, I'm moving forward just in the mystery and in the trust.
Mm,
And I think it's important because the innocence of the children points to this original pre-sin state, like before we got our hearts broken, before we were manipulated, abused, programmed into the various pathologies of culture. Like then we're in that innocence. And so I love that you're pointing towards children, to say, hey, we all have that inner child inside of us. And there's also kind of a like another level of innocence, people like yourself, like I'm part of what I admire about you is as a adult who has been hurt, who's been fucked over, who's been like
for
that
sure.
you still choose innocence is like doubly gorgeous. Like it's like a choice to trust again and to be open again. And that's what touches me.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, innocence, dance. Yeah, being in the unknown, but yet feeling safe, because I don't know yet that as a child, I don't know yet that my family is dysfunctional and fucked up, and there's no feeling of safety or love, or this is my daddy and mommy or whoever the caregiver was. So this is how I see the world. This is my bubble.
Yeah.
So thank you for, yeah, for saying that. And um, erotic, erotic part of it. This is still something that I'm dancing with myself. What is the definition of erotic? Because this word is maybe not as controversial as sexual or sensual, but I don't know, maybe it's in the same category. And erotic is, for me, erotic is feeling pleasure. And as a Daikini Tantrika and Yogini, for me, learning the tantric path of life, and not just with in my work, but for myself, how I move through the world, right? Weaving, weaving again, going back into the unknown, the darkness,
Mhm.
and trusting what is now, what is in front of me is how can I, there is no bad or good or what gives me things that I think will give me pleasure, or things that I'm repelled by, or people, right? So this
Yeah.
is that erotic part when I can still feel that current of um, pleasure in me, how I move through life, and the life force energy, which can intertwine in many ways, right? In sexual way, sensual way, but something around that is.
It's beautiful to hear you just, streaming and like jamming on the topic of like, what is Eros? And as it streams through you, I, I'm moved by how expanded your definition is, because you're like, oh, Eros is this thing I can't fully define, but it's this whole stream, this whole frequency, this whole, dimension, really. There's a dimensionality to it. And I loved hearing you say it's not from the mind, because part of how we know what something is when we define what it's not. And even the early, Greek philosophers that talked about Eros being different than Logos, it's not logical. It's not. So there is this Eros is connected to the life force, the sensuality, um, and it's also connected to the it's a little bit cardinal, like the animal body, the primal, the like something that's like prefrontal cortex, like it's like coming from something very primordial in us. um yeah, so I feel I feel resonant with the challenge to define what Eros is, but it is so much more than just sexuality, because it is all the senses, and it's all the like the animal impulses towards like merging and and coming together and exploring. And yeah.
Yeah, and to what I'm hearing you're saying, to add to this, is, yeah, defining eras, that everybody's so unique, and we all have, based on whatever gifts we have, our upbringing, what our souls came here to learn and experience. We are, we see the world differently, we move through the world differently, and also our senses react differently to different things, and reactions in our bodies. So, and yeah, as children, usually the school system or society tries to put us all in the same box, so we see the world the same. And when that happens, then there's something that gets, the crack happens, right? And the hurt happens, and then it's like we're not allowed to have that flow of eras of our life force move in the way that it wants to move, and it becomes unsafe to be ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, so you're kind of pointing at there's a point in our, and I won't even say education, I'll say like our own appropriate what's acceptable programming, that everybody goes through this journey of maturing, and there's a point at which it's like, okay, and there's a fall from innocence. There's a now Eros and innocence and Eros both come to a critical moment when they're kind of lost. There's a loss of it, there's a separation from it. And that
Separate, yes.
yeah, and so that kind of brings us to this like taboo, right? Like it is whether we make the decision that my eros is bad or wrong, or I feel shame, or somebody directly shames us and puts that on us, there comes a moment when we gather limiting beliefs that these forces are no longer acceptable, and or they're private or hidden, or and so let's talk a little bit about the taboo, like why it's scary to say, hey, I want to pursue erotic innocence, or I want to open
Ooh.
up in my life, like what's the taboo on erotic innocence?
Oh, oh, there's so many things. Thank you for this question. Well, firstly, and which I think in a way an oxymoron in itself, right? Talking about Eris and talking about innocence or childlike innocence is the topics that we should not be talking about in the same context. And yet, children come from love, they're product of love between two people, usually, or how it was designed to be. And it's something dirty, but yes, it's okay that, yeah, we conceive children, but we don't talk about how it happens. And it's okay to talk about violence, and it's okay to talk about abuse and show it to children and to other people or in the family, but it's not okay to
talk
talk
about
about
making love and
pleasure and joy. So that's already a taboo. Like in the one of the big parts of essence or fundaments where it's already there is a big crack and separation. What you mentioned before.
yeah, let's stay with that one for a moment, because what you're pointing out is how pathological or demented it is that we live in a society where like sex education for early sex education for kids is something that is like like not allowed or dangerous, or just speaking freely about sensuality, sexuality, pleasure, and children, and talking about the two things in the same sentence is very, very challenging. But I don't want to dismiss like where that came from, which there's a deep wisdom if because children are so innocent, impressionable, tender, that education has to come from like the heart and sacredness. And if it comes from ulterior motives or lust or desire or perversion, then it's like, hey, part of the reason that that's a taboo is because culture's trying to protect the children from that not being a good initiation. Like they're in a very formative space, and so those conversations are very tender. And so a lot of school systems, for example, just err on the side of let's not talk about it at all, as opposed to let's bring the sacredness, let's bring the beauty, let's bring the life giving reverence into those conversations. Instead, it's like, let's cut it off. And by severing that, it's to protect the children, right? That's the reason. But what it ends up doing is creating what a taboo does is now when something's forbidden, it either becomes, people become obsessed with it, right? Like they're like, oh, children are like trying to find porn or trying to find the locker room conversation. Like and it goes
Playing
into
doctor with each other.
Yeah, just doing their exploration, but not knowing what they're doing. And it goes into the shadows. And then it also goes into like guilt because I don't know what I'm doing. And it goes into like these deep pathological cycles because of the lack of acceptance and openness around it.
Yeah. And then what was coming through me as you were talking about it is that experiential part of uses the senses, using the human body to learn to defer what is pleasurable, what is painful, what is dangerous. It's just getting cut off. And at very early age, usually, um, we we are reprogrammed to be, not to be human beings, but to be human doings. and and then being so judged and not accepted, and then it cuts off the flow of the life force. And um yeah, even in a lot of families, not just not children are not accepted to touch themselves, and they have no ulterior motives. They're just exploring the curiosity with which we see the world. We're coming from outer space, or whatever you believe in, right? And we're new on this planet, and we want to know what that is. And then we're being programmed how it should be. And if we're feeling pleasure, then it's only related to sex or sin, or what you're saying, guilt or shame. But there's nothing sacred or innocent or gratifying. Yes. And in that, then it's more likely that we're going to develop some shadows and go into them and have nobody to talk about.
What I'm hearing, the impact of that taboo then cuts off the natural impulse, the curiosity, it cuts us off from the beingness, the erotic nature that we are. And that is the tragedy, is like, oh, our life force energy actually kind of gets blocked and stumped at those early stages. Yeah.
Yes. And what it does, I'm curious to hear what you have to share about that. And also, I don't have children of my own, and you have teenage son. How as children we love to go into fantasy world and dream and make up things, and we're so creative in so many different ways, and it kind of turns us on and turn on our life force energy, that erotic energy, which we are. Mm-hmm. And what happens when all of that cuts off, and we're being told how we need to live in order to be safe, in order to fit in order to find love, whatever else that's being programmed into us.
Yeah.
And what it does to us.
I love this question of like, what happens when that gets like interfered with? And I say that like open-ended, what happens? Because for some people, what happens is actually very different for different people, right? And for some people, it's like that, oh, now I'm obsessed with it, and all the energy goes in, and I become almost like, it's like a obsession. Yeah, it's too much eros, and they don't realize that this eros can come beyond the body and those fixations into take us, to all kinds of levels and creativity and other expressions. And I really do feel that we live in this schizophrenic society that's both sex obsessed and sex repressed, like both, right? So, but it has to do with this original kind of messaging that
we need to have some humor about it when we talk about it. Otherwise, it's too heavy. It's too heavy.
And it is funny. Like, it's totally schizophrenic. And, but when you talked about self-pleasure is such a natural impulse. Like it's just this soothing curiosity, this, like, it's got so there's so many reasons to self-pleasure, and none of them are rational reasons. It's just, this is the natural, exploration of the body. And what I wanted to say about it is that when we are told by mother, father, church, state, it doesn't matter, that what you feel as good, because it feels good, is bad for some moral reason, then what happens is, oh my God, can I trust myself? Because my body and everything in me says this feels good, but society says this is bad. Now I'm going to give up my inner authority, and I'm going to believe that somebody out there knows something more than what my body is telling me. It has a wisdom that is being denied everywhere I look. So I must be wrong. I must not trust myself. And that's when the innocence is lost, because there's no more trust.
Oh, and then I'm putting my power into somebody else's hands and thinking that they know better, or the book knows better, or whoever is in charge or power knows better.
Yeah. And that my impulses are dirty or to be questioned, or, like misguided. Yeah.
And then it creates more separation from myself, which I'm already whole and one piece, and makes me believe. And that's been ingrained in us for centuries. So it's not just right, like in this lifetime, but the society, my family, whoever, it's on such deep genetic level, on the cellular level, right? So it's really hard to unwind it, uncondition it.
Right.
And then it creates even more separation for me from myself, not only from my pleasure, but from my body, from who I am. And
absolutely. Let's talk
constant, right. Mm-hmm.
about that unwinding, because that's actually, something that you're gifted at, is helping people it's not just like cult deprogramming, right? It is an unlearning of
Unlearning.
the damage and those unblocking those limiting beliefs. And so what is that reclamation? Like, how do we get back to that natural erotic innocent state? And I'd love to hear a little bit more about, like, actually what's important before the how, because the how can look all kinds of different ways, is the why, like why it's important to reclaim that. You know, what I know erotic innocence is like, this is a mission for you. It's like a calling. And I want to know why. Why is that so important for everyone?
Ooh. I feel like, ooh. Thank you. And as you pointed out, there's so many different ways for different people, and how they get back to that reclamation. And um, maybe for some people, this term is not resonant at all or repelling. That's fine. It's not for everyone. Um, or not everybody's ready to hear it, or
some people already have and felt like, I've got that. I don't need that.
right. Thank you. Right there. So I want to acknowledge that. And why? Yeah. And again, that's just
Maybe
from
maybe let's just like talk about you. Like, why is erotic innocence so near and dear to your heart?
that's what right, thank you. That's what I wanted to say. What just from my personal journey, and how um being getting guided into being the space of sacred sexuality, and working with that, and finding different ways to reconnect to my body and my heart and my sexuality. And how did you say, not deprogramming, unwinding,
Unlearning.
unlearning. Thank you.
Is there a moment that you can think of on your path when you're like, oh, this was when I really reclaimed my erotic innocence? Is there something that comes up, a little tale or a anecdote around that?
I think for me, it's that what you said before, having that childlike, I don't know, just being like childlike, but also being turned on by so many things.
Yeah.
And um it's such a it's such a serious topic, like sex and sexuality, and the way that I approach it, and in my work and with my clients, is kind of to like ease into that, and it doesn't have to be so serious. And um what am I trying to say here?
Well, I'll share a little bit. What's
Thank you.
coming up is in kink, there's the practices of age play. All right. So I want to just name that I on my kinky path, the kind of awakening moment for me was being a submissive, a professional. Like I had a professional dominatrix who I worked with, and as a submissive, we would go into so I was professional under her, and these usually Japanese rich businessmen would come and hire our services for a little retreat or whatever it was, time wise. But what astounded me is to see these very powerful men who were obviously mature, running companies, or who wanted to play with age play, which is either me going into the little schoolgirl, or them being a little boy that's getting disciplined, or so the kink has some of this like real taboo stuff that I understood deeply. But at first I'm like, oh, that's kinky, this is weird, and what's that, these aren't pedophiles by any stretch. This is a part of, it's a psychodrama to reclaim a part of the soul that didn't get the attention. It's like there's a longing in that child that was frozen at that age, and they don't have an outlet for it. So instead, paying for like this healing session where we could do this age play allowed them to feel empowered, and that their desires are welcome and fulfilled. And I would come away, and especially because I saw when they came in, and I was would help them undress or whatever the practice was, I could see who the being was. I could feel them at the beginning of the session, and at the end of the session it was like they were younger, more vital, more just energetic. And I was like, wow, there's a reclamation that happened here. And I always felt like judgment at the beginning, and then just going, what's there to judge? This is so beautiful. And this person's really more whole as a result of this. And just to say, not every dominatrix scene is a healthy one, and not every age play is a healthy one, but for the most part, if you're holding it with that intention of healing, and it's done with conscious consent of everyone, and we're clear that, hey, it's okay to have these fantasies, and it's not okay to act out on anyone who's underage or not in consent, then the sky's the limit around what your desires may be.
Thank you for sharing that. And as you were talking about it, it made me very emotional. And trying to bring it back to my life, and why am I talking about it? Why am I so passionate about it? is is in my own life, having to become an adult at a very young age, and a caregiver, and being a grown up and doing grown up things, and keeping secrets and keeping everything together, when I mean, since I was 7 years old until through my teenage years, and then being severely depressed and suicidal, and not knowing what's the way out. I didn't really know that I was per se deprived of my childhood. I didn't know psychology or any of the terms, or definitely not kink or anything like that. And I thought I knew what's right and what's wrong and how things supposed to be. And then when I got introduced to this world, alternative world, and started doing the sexual healing work and learning about it, it had such big impact, huge impact on my own healing, as not only as a person, but also as a woman, and also understanding why people, mostly men, because it's more, I think it's more acceptable in our society for men to look for alternative ways to heal, or um, um, uh, fill that lacking, that longiness, that loneliness
Mm.
somewhere else, is that separation from our whole holiness inside of us, that I am, the idea that I am not enough and that I have to be looking for a mommy, for a daddy. If in simple terms, I'm not just talking about age play or kink play, right? But in some psychological terms, subconsciously, right? What kind of partners we're looking for, or what we think we don't have, when coming back to that erotic innocence within myself empowers me and gives me permission to have that curiosity, to not give a flying heck what people what people will think about me if I don't follow the rules. And of course, my journey has not been it's been going, going to the extremes, kind of like as a child, like, ooh, there's fire, it's shiny, let me try to put my finger, on the stove. It's like, no, no, you're gonna burn yourself. But if I don't burn myself sometimes, I'm not gonna learn. But I will have that desire to go into the shiny bright orange thing, and one day I might. And it's kind of like reclaiming myself and reclaiming my whole holiness as a human being. And in that, oh gosh, I'm going to touch upon another thing. For me, this is coming back to God, which is also, for me, is also has been a big journey, coming from a Jewish and Orthodox Christian family and growing up in Soviet Union, which was very atheistic, and growing up as atheist. So I just wanted to mention it. Finding God, that it is not somewhere else, and it's not in church, it's not in a temple, it's in me. And the God is showing up through me when the lower chakra centers my security, my self of, I am enough, I can take care of myself, I don't need anybody else. It's safe for me to open my heart. It can actually, I don't have to be stuck there in whatever shadows it can come up. But like, then I can open, it gives me permission to open my heart a little bit more. And in that connection, right, in so many traditions, I feel like there's the flow of that life force energy, kundalini, whatever you want to call it, whatever you believe in. And then there is God, and this is here and now, and this is that present moment, and this is where I can feel all that spaciousness, and not longing, craving, whatever, for anybody outside of myself. So I can actually ask myself, what do I need right now, what do I want right now, what feels good for me right now. And this is a very tender topic, and there's a lot to put
Beautiful.
into this. So thank you for helping me to navigate that.
Yeah, it's really touching that the why, when I'm like, why do we want to reconnect with this original, like this innocent, erotic innocence? It's like to plug back into our original nature, our true state of connection with God. That's what I'm hearing from you, is like, this is a path to reconnect with our source energy. And it's so true, and it's so beautiful. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I wish that we could talk more about it, but we're we're gonna wrap up. And this is such a sweet note to touch on, but I know that there's people who'd love to continue the conversation and resonate with you. How can they find you? How might are you available for more on this topic?
Yes, thank you, KD. I'm definitely available, and I'm definitely interested to connecting to whoever's interested to learning more, or having a discovery call with me. I'm physically located in Southern California, in between Los Angeles and San Diego. And you can reach me directly on via Facebook Messenger. My name is Ella Move. It's spelled ELLA, last name MOVE. And I would be happy to chat more with you. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And I know erotic innocence happens to be like this topic we're both juiced on in the moment, but there's so many other wonderful.
I'm feeling so, yeah.
You're vibrating. But I also wanted to name that Ella's a phenomenal meditation teacher and, has various like practices to really, reclaim that oneness that aren't, erotic innocence is a doorway, but there's other doorways to that. And I really, I really celebrate your work as a love leader. And it's such an honor to be in this conversation starter with you.
I feel the same.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was very juicy and very heartfelt conversation for me.
Blessings and happy holidays to whoever's watching. Take care.
Happy holidays to you all. Be safe.